Here's what all addictions share. Number 1, a numbing of the reward circuitry. And number 2, rewiring of brain circuits. We're going to go into depth in all of these. So if you have a numbing of the reward circuitry, you've messed up your dopamine response in some way. It becomes harder to stimulate that part of your brain. Whether with food, or sex, or drugs, or rock and roll, you simply feel less pleasure. Now, feeling less pleasure leads to craving whatever will give you more pleasure, and that's often your addiction. Your reward circuitry is now basically like a flashlight with fading batteries. Next, how does the rewiring of brain circuits happen? Well, a couple of things. First, you get a stronger go for it signal. Go for what? Go for the addiction. You've wired together a bunch of nerve cells that are screaming, let's do that again. Let's repeat the addictive behavior. This simply adds to the cravings of the numbed reward circuitry. Think of our circuitry as a muscle. If you exercise more, it will grow stronger. But if you seldomly use the muscle, it will get weaker. The more you use the reward circuitry, satisfying the cravings, the stronger it gets. The second thing is your control circuit, which understands the consequences of your action, will also be weaker. These higher circuits know that drinking a bottle of whiskey or watching porn for 12 hours a day may not be the best idea. So, with an addiction, it's sort of like a tug of war, and the go for it circuit is winning. To understand addiction, we need to understand what changes, and that is nerve cells. Most importantly, what changes is the connection between nerve cells. The brain contains billions of nerve cells, and they're connected in circuits or pathways like the reward circuit, and endless other circuits. When a circuit is activated, we have a thought, a feeling, an experience specific to those circuits. Okay, we're going to get down to the basics of the fact here. We have a picture of two nerve cells, and they're connected at a tiny little gap called a synapse. See, you have electricity that flows along one nerve cell to the other nerve cell, but it really doesn't. The electricity stops at this little gap, and it causes the sending nerve cell to release neurochemicals, maybe dopamine, and then they float over and they attach to the receiving nerve cell. They attach to places called receptors. Really look at those, it's going to be important. Now, the receptors are like little ears on the receiving nerve cell, and it can listen to the message that's being sent. There are many neurochemicals in the brain, many types, each with a different message. If there are enough neurochemicals released from the sending cell, the receiving cell hears the message and fires an impulse. And then we have an experience. Why am I boring you with all this stuff about the synapse? Why do we care about the synapse? This gap between two nerve cells? Well, this is where all addictions occur. All addictions. Changes here in the synapse lead to a numbed pleasure response and rewiring of the brain. What we have right now, at the left and right, is the nerve cells communicating. The red round things are dopamine being released by the sending nerve cells, and they're sending it from other parts of the brain. Now, the receiving nerve cells notice this reward nerve cells and are receiving the message, so electricity flows along the nerve cells. The more electricity comes, the more dopamine is released. So if you look at the left one, you have a whole lot of dopamine because you have more impulses of electricity heading down the reward cell. This would give you a greater experience of excitement. It may be like heading towards orgasm. You're high. You don't want to stop. Let's look at the right cell. You can see there's hardly any dopamine being released. This could be after an orgasm, where you have no desire whatsoever. So the level of neurochemical or dopamine release equals the power of the message. From something like methamphetamine or cocaine, the power of the message or dopamine can be huge. Here we are again, looking at a synapse. Notice the receptors. So the key is that the receiving cell is able to hear the message through the receptors. As I said, the receptors are like ears, or some people say it's like little locks. And in this case, dopamine is the key that unlocks them. And when they're unlocked, the message continues along the receiving nerve cell. Now, if you look at this picture, the cell's normal number of receptors is full of dopamine. Here it's simplified to just 4. So a go signal is being transmitted to the receiving cell. You need all those receptors activated to properly hear the message. With addiction, Changes occur with the number of receptors. If you look at this, you have the normal number of receptors. In other words, the receiving cell can hear the message. The reward circuitry can hear it. While in this case, the number is low, only a couple. This is what happens in all addictions. The D2 receptor is the type of dopamine receptor that actually crashes. That may not be interesting, but I need to mention that. Now with overstimulation, the dopamine will overflow into the synapse. The receiving nerve cell says, enough, I can't handle all this dopamine. It's like someone screams at you and you cover your ears. Well, nerve cells accomplish this by getting rid of their dopamine receptors. In other words, you may have plenty of gas to run the reward circuitry. That is the dopamine, but your engine is missing some of the cylinders, the receptors. Fewer dopamine receptors lead to a weakened sensitivity or numbed pleasure response. This is what all addictions have in common. Basically, your brain is crying out, I need more dopamine to feel okay, but there are not enough receptors to hear the message. Literally, there's not enough electricity flowing in the reward circuitry to make you feel okay. You have less pleasure from normal everyday things, such as chocolate ice cream or foreplay or watching your favorite TV show. The low receptors lead to other symptoms also, such as being tired, depressed, anxious, irritable, until someone goes all the way through withdrawal and the dopamine receptors bounce back. They won't really experience normal levels of pleasure. This is one of the main reasons addicts have such cravings. They're looking for something to make them feel good.